All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their 2024 season. And it was an eventful one. How it went, what they've done in the offseason so far, where they're going to be picking, what they could potentially do with their first round selection. So, the Steelers. In the previous offseason, they completely changed their quarterback room. They had Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and Mitchell Trubisky. All three of those guys no longer with the team. Well, one of them is now back with the team, but last offseason they all left or were traded. Kenny Pickett got traded to the Eagles, and Mason Rudolph signed with the Titans, and Trubisky once again became the backup to Josh Allen. So what the Steelers did is they traded for Justin Fields, and they also signed Russell Wilson to the veterans minimum. Now, Russell Wilson ended up not starting the year. Well, we talked about all this before because Russell Wilson signed with the Giants. Dealt with a calf injury, so he missed, the first part of the season, first 6 games, and Justin Fields started. And the Steelers ended up going 4-2 with Justin Fields. They started off 3-0. And, I thought at that point, I was saying, look, if Russ is healthy and the Steelers are still winning games, I think you keep going with Fields until he starts to not play well. But that ended up not happening. So, Fields, they started off 3-0. They beat the Falcons. Kirk Cousins' debut did not go very well. Steelers won on defense and 6 Boswell field goals. And that's not the only time that Boswell was their only source of offense, because that happened again later in the year. But then they beat the Broncos. Bo Nix, his second career start. They won that game 13-6. They beat the Chargers 20-10 at home. They did lose to the Colts, however, 27-24. Fields did have over 300 yards passing. George Pickens had a big day, but Fields fumbled the ball. Pickens fumbled it. Those turnovers were costly. Fields did have 2 rushing touchdowns. But yeah, so they ended up losing that game. Actually, Joe Flacco played the majority of that game because Anthony Richardson got hurt. And then they ended up losing to the Cowboys the following week as well. Fields didn't put up big numbers in that game. Only had 131 yards passing and 27 yards rushing. The leading receiver was Najee Harris. He had 2 receptions for 35 yards. Cowboys won at the very end. Still don't know how they won that, but they did. And that game got pushed back because of bad weather. So that game was over at midnight. Well, after midnight. But then they beat up on the Raiders. Their running game really worked in that contest. They had almost 200 yards rushing and 3 rushing touchdowns. So, yeah, 4-2. But then Fields goes to the bench, and they put in Russell Wilson against the Jets. And, Russ was efficient. 264 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Steelers ran the ball for 149 yards. Pickens had 111 yards receiving and a touchdown. The Steelers almost had a pick 6 in that game. They picked off Aaron Rodgers twice. But yeah, they went 37-15. It was 15-6, and then they proceeded to score 31 unanswered points. Then they win a close game against the Giants on Monday night. They get an interception of Daniel Jones at the end to cement the win. Tyrone Tracy had a big day, though. They had a problem stopping him. He had over 140 yards rushing. But Russ, 278 yards passing and a touchdown. Najee Harris had a good game. Then they went into the bye, and they came out of the bye. And this is when we got to the very tough part of their schedule. So they were going up against the Commanders. Commanders at that point were 7-2. Steelers were 6-2. And they acquired Mike Williams at the trade deadline. He ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown. And the Steelers won by a point, 28-27. And then you start to say, all right, are the Steelers legit? And we said that even more because they won a very close game with the Ravens. And once again, Chris Boswell came up clutch and kicked 6 field goals, and the Steelers won 18-16. Now, the Ravens hurt themselves. Derrick Henry fumbled very early on in the game. and that proved costly. Isaiah Likely also had a fumble in the game as well. But at that point, the Steelers were 8-2, and you're thinking, wow, they could win the AFC North. But then they lose in that snow game against the Browns, and that proved to be a big difference. A big difference. The Browns, 2 of their 3 victories, we talked about this week, came against division rivals, the Steelers and the Ravens. But the Steelers had an opportunity to win that game. We had a lot of points being scored in the fourth quarter. Game was going back and forth. And, the Steelers lost. And, sorry, had to hold back the sneeze. I try the best I can, but it's just, I can't do it. Can't do it. But yeah, so they ended up losing 24-19. But then they bounced back. They put up 44 points against the Bengals. Russell Wilson had over 400 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He did have an interception in the game. But the Steelers got back on track. They improved to 9-3, and then they got their revenge on the Browns a week later, and they won 27-14. They did not have George Pickens in that game, but they were still able to come away with the win. Jameis Winston threw a couple of picks. So, yeah, Steelers were not at 10-3 at that point, and you thought, wow, they're in the driver's seat to win this division. It's theirs to lose. And then they proceeded to lose 5 straight games, including the playoffs. They lost 27-13 against the Eagles. Now, there was a momentum shift in that game. Najee Harris fumbled in the game, and that kind of changed the momentum of it. Was it Najee Harris? Well, Russ fumbled in the game. Oh, wait, actually, no. I think that was the Najee Harris fumble, because there was miscommunication on the pitch, and that led to a momentum shift there. But, they ended up losing that game 27-13. Ravens beat up on them 34-17. Derrick Henry ran all over them. He ran the ball for 162 yards. The Ravens ran the ball for 220 yards in total. Lamar Jackson had 3 touchdown passes. So, yeah, both teams were 10-5 at that point. Then they played on Christmas against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs dominated. Mahomes had 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And the offense just couldn't do anything that day. Russ threw a pick. And then they played against the Bengals, and they lose a close game there, 19-17. And, Steelers ended up being a wild card team, and they lost 28-14. And, they showed some life in the second half, but, yeah, they got shut out 21-0 in the first half, and maybe if they would have played a little bit better, who knows. But Derrick Henry, once again, almost 200 yards rushing in the game. The Ravens as a team ran the ball for 299 yards. And they got knocked out. One and done once again. And now we'll see what happens. They bring in Mason Rudolph. They're in on Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, if he's still going to play, is probably going to be the quarterback next year. The way it's set up. But it was a disappointing finish to their year. And looking at the stats for the Steelers, individual players, you look at the regular season. So Russ finished with 16 touchdown passes to 5 picks. We talked about that. Fields had 5 touchdowns to 1 pick, had 1,100 yards passing. Najee Harris over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's not going to be back. They brought in Kenneth Gainwell. Jalen Warren, 511 yards rushing and a touchdown. Fields had 5 rushing touchdowns. They did kind of sprinkle him in at times. I felt like in the playoff game they should have went back to Fields, to see if he could provide a spark, but that never happened. And George Pickens did miss some time in 2024. He was their leading receiver, 900 yards, receiving and 3 touchdowns. And then Pat Freiermuth, he led the team in touchdown receptions. He had 7. He had 653 yards. Calvin Austin, I like what I saw from him last year. I've voiced that a lot on the show. He had 548 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Mike Williams, though, other than that one play against the Commanders, really was a non-factor. I mean, he had 9 receptions for 132 yards and a touchdown. That's basically something he would do with the Chargers when he was with Justin Herbert. And then for the defense, Patrick Queen on the season, he led the team in tackles, 65 total tackles. He had 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles. Minkah Fitzpatrick on the year, he had 1 interception on the year. Dante Jackson, who is no longer with the team, he had 5 interceptions. He led the team. T.J. Watt, 11.5 sacks. That led the team. Alex Highsmith had 6. Nick Herbig, he had 5.5. 4 forced fumbles. T.J. Watt had 6 forced fumbles. Defense is getting older. Oh, he also had Cam Hayward, who had 8 sacks as well. Can't forget about him. But yeah, Steelers defense is still pretty good. Looking at Boswell's stats, though, I mean, he was money. 41 of 44 for field goals. That's 93%. 35 of 35 on extra points. So he was 9 of 9 on 20 to 29 yarders. 12 of 12 for 30 on 30 to 39 yard field goals. 7 of 8 on 40 to 49 yards. I think the one miss was the game against the Browns in the snow. So actually, I might be wrong, though, on that. And then he was 13 of 15 for 50-plus yard field goals. But, yeah, he was unbelievable this year. He was, one of their MVPs, honestly. And then looking at the exact stats for both their offense and their defense. So, offensively, yeah, they were in the 20s. Total yards per game, they were 23rd. Points per game, they were 20th. Rushing yards, they were 11th. Passing yards, they were 27th. So, yeah, the offense, was average. And then defensively, total yards allowed per game, they were 12th. Although the Ravens, really brought it to them in the 2 games of Baltimore. Points allowed per game, they were 8th. Rushing yards allowed per game, they were 6th. Passing yards allowed per game, they were 25th. So the Steelers, that's an area they could address maybe as a secondary. And in the offseason, they traded for DK Metcalf, which I like that move. They needed another big-name receiver, and they got it. So we'll see how that combination works with him and George Pickens. We could see George Pickens traded. Who knows? They also signed a couple of guys in the secondary. They signed Brandon Eccles. They signed Juan Thornhill. They brought back Mason Rudolph. Oh, yeah, they also signed Darius Slay as well. So they have addressed the secondary. Malik Harrison they brought in as well, another former Raven. So that's what they've done in the offseason. The major move was obviously the trade with DK. And then they will be picking 21st. So they could take a Jackson Dart. That's something that could happen. If not, they take a quarterback later in the draft possibly. But I think at some point you will see the Steelers take a quarterback. Second round, they ended up trading for DK Metcalf. They got a 6th round in return. So they have a 3rd round pick. That's ninth pick in the round, 83rd overall. Then they have the 21st pick in the 4th round, which is 123rd. 5th round, they have the 20th pick, which is 156th. Now they have a 6th round pick. 9th pick in the round, that's the 185th pick. And then they have a 7th rounder, which is the 13th pick in the round, which is 229th overall, which was from Atlanta through the Eagles. So that's a little complicated there, but that's where they're going to be picking. You can definitely see them adding another playmaker to the offense at some point in the draft, but I think we will see them take a quarterback at some point. So we will see what happens. And my friend was just saying something about Mookie Betts, so I want to see if we can, because I know we talked about him a little bit yesterday. So I don't see anything right now. I'm looking on Twitter right now. I don't see anything. But hopefully, well, I'm trying to see if I can pull it up. But I'm not seeing anything. Yeah, I don't see anything right now. I'm seeing him talking about the medicine work that he's taking for the illness that he's dealing with. So I don't know. But we'll talk about it tomorrow. If we have an update on that. Again, I was checking social media, couldn't find anything. But yeah, hopefully everything's okay though. But that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well on the network. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channels, and make sure to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts as well. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go